On the fringe of the galaxy, among drifting shards of stardust and swirling nebulas steeped in shadow, lay the planet Helion. Its sprawling metropolis glowed faintly beneath a canopy of cosmic radiance. Its polished towers and winding alleyways, shaped by an ancient architecture that had endured countless centuries. Clusters of star-bound vessels dotted the upper atmosphere, like luminescent petals scattered across an obsidian surface, each waiting for the moment they might descend upon the battered world's surface. This was the realm Lord Atrion had seized and shaped, according to his iron will, where twisted spectacle had become routine, and the Colosseum reigned as a stage for grim amusements. In Helion's largest square, an immense stadium of black metallic arches rose like a perfect crown of obsidian, known by most simply as the Colosseum, or by others, in hushed tones, as Atrion's playground. It had been constructed long before the rule of any mortal. Legend claimed it was erected by Helion's earliest inhabitants to honor the warrior spirits of their star-lost gods. But over time, under Atrion's tight fist, the place had grown twisted into an arena of public entertainment where gladiators fought monstrous beasts, criminals met their fate, and enslaved peoples were paraded for the callous delight of the masses. Even from the deserted outskirts, one could sense the cheers vibrating through the labyrinthine city. Nights in Helion were never quiet. Laughter and screams alike became the twisted lullabies that guided many to fitful rest. Over the decades, the populace had grown numb to the endless battles, but still, they filled the stands, lured by the insatiable hunger for blood, spectacle, and ephemeral glory. It was into this tumultuous stage that Riven arrived as an itinerant warrior, his entire life shaped by solitude. A swordsman of no declared banner, clad in worn leather and chain. He carried only a single long sword strapped across his back. The insignia on its hilt was obscured by nicks and streaks of dried blood. Where he hailed from, few ever learned, for Riven spoke little about his past, only that necessity drove him to wander from planet to planet. Surviving by the blade, he had come to Helion not in search of victory or gold, but with a quiet curiosity. Some said rumors of a hidden power locked within the Colosseum's core drew him. Others believed he was simply passing through, letting fate guide his restless feet. Still more whispered of a deeper quest, that Riven carried a personal vendetta against Lord Atrion, though they had never laid eyes on one another. Whatever his motive, Riven found himself stepping through the city's gates, where neon-laced streets led deeper into a spiraling urban sprawl. Despite its dark reputation, Helion was also a center of commerce, attracting traders from far-flung regions of the galaxy. Marketplaces burst with color under artificial suns, and hawkers praised their wares in many tongues. Strange aromas, sweet and pungent, wafted from the stalls. In the crowd, vagrants, thieves, and the wealthy intermingled as part of a single teeming organism. Helion was as vibrant as it was disquieting. Riven soon became acquainted with a local custom. New arrivals were often coerced into donating to the city's self-appointed protectors, under threat of punishment. Yet something in Riven's stance, the alertness of a predator, the quiet steadiness in his gaze made them hesitate. Grumbling, the enforcers stepped aside, leaving him to continue on to a lodging house. Strangers parted before him in the narrow walkways, uncertain if they should treat him like a wandering fool or a lethal adversary. His powerful aura allowed him a thin margin of peace. That night, on a creaking cot in a neglected hostel that smelled of mold and rotting timber, Riven dozed amid flickering lamplight. Dreams assailed him, not with the usual nightmares of battle, but with the vision of a silver-haired woman bound by chains. Her features, though partly veiled, radiated an otherworldly calm. She uttered no words, but Riven sensed her anguish, as though it were etched into the darkness. The dream offered no explanation, merely scattered impressions of a voice in his mind, a voice that whispered, "I am Ailey's, please." He awoke in the gray hush of early morning. A tremor rattled across his chest, not one of dread, but of resolute conviction. There was a purpose here that transcended mere wanderlust. Though Riven was a man who had long since learned not to linger or entangle himself with strangers, the dream haunted him. A name repeated through his mind, Alice. The city streets by day did nothing to calm Riven's turmoil. Suspicion clung to him like a second skin, a reflex from too many betrayals in his past. Yet he could not banish her voice from his thoughts. He found himself walking in a slow, meandering route, drifting toward the Colosseum that dominated the heart of Helion. Its looming presence threw a gargantuan shadow across the neighboring districts. Before he realized it, he'd stepped inside. Once across its threshold, the interior expanded into a vast open amphitheater, with tiered stands rising into dizzying heights. The walls were lined with pillars carved in arcane patterns, each pillar adorned with alien glyphs that glowed faintly. In the center was a circular arena floor built from steel plating, outfitted with hidden compartments that unleashed deadly obstacles and mechanical monstrosities. The air was thick with the smell of sweat and ozone. Scattered in the arena's antechambers were potential combatants, each weighed down by arms or oppressive shackles. There was a hush of dread, but also an undercurrent of savage expectancy. Riven's gaze slid over them, wondering what hidden tragedies had brought them to this place. In a side corridor, he glimpsed a figure. She was perched on a wooden bench, arms shackled in dull iron. The swirling lights of the corridor caught the soft glimmer of her silver hair. For a moment, he doubted his senses, but the voice in his dreams resonated, and the final threads of suspicion melted away. This was indeed the one called Alice. Alice had once been a diplomat and empathic ambassador from a race that valued peace above all else. Her people, the Viridians, possessed a unique gift. They could sense and ease emotional distress, forging pathways for reconciliation. Over centuries, they had built a reputation for brokering treaties across galaxies, bridging cultures with empathy and understanding. That was, until Lord Atrion came upon the idea of the so-called Purity Project, for reasons she could not fathom. Atrion set in motion a plan to eliminate the Viridians, branding them a threat to the natural order. He claimed their empathic abilities were perversions of the cosmic balance. His propaganda networks flared across Helion, painting the Viridians as parasitic manipulators who preyed on the minds of unsuspecting worlds. At first, the galaxy looked on with disbelief. But by leveraging Helion's wealth and strategic resources, Atrion twisted many arms into complicity or fearful silence. Before Alice could rally her fellow diplomats, the noose had tightened. Her kin were forced into hiding or sold into enslavement. Countless Viridians disappeared, rumored to be detained in hidden facilities or executed within Helion's looming walls. She, too, had been taken. The soldier who captured her, a devout zealot of Atrion, sneered that her spirit would break. Day after day, she was subjected to interrogations, starved of hope, humiliated in front of crowds who believed her presence a stain. Still, she did not forsake her empathy despite the cruelty. She felt the presence of glimmers of kindness in Helion's people, battered beneath layers of fear. Now, exhausted yet resolute, she awaited the day's grim spectacle. The ringmaster had informed her that a particularly savage event was planned. Her empathic abilities would be tested. So they said, as a final condemnation of her race, she would face a beast in the arena, unarmed. While Helion's people watched with detached excitement, she could sense the crowd beyond the walls, their raw curiosity emanating in restless waves. Many were indifferent, ignorant to the deeper implications of what was to happen. Others felt pangs of guilt or sorrow, but loudest of all were the pulses of malice and glee, hearts that had grown deaf to compassion. It was then Alice sensed something else, a presence, stirring like a gentle ripple among a cacophony of thunder. She lifted her gaze from the grimy floor to see a tall figure in the corridor, his features partially illuminated by the glow of the overhead lighting. Their eyes locked. In that instant, Alice felt a wave of conflicting emotions rolling off Riven, a deep, carefully guarded sadness, coiled rage, but also unwavering courage. She had no idea who he was, but she felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps an ally had emerged at last. Riven advanced, his footsteps echoing on the stone. At first, he didn't speak. He simply stared at her bound wrists. Then, in a low, quiet voice, he asked, "Are you the Viridian called Ares?" The question startled her, for seldom did anyone address her with such directness. Slowly, she nodded. "Yes. Who are you?" "Riven," he replied. "I've traveled far. I had a dream. Somehow, it was your voice." Ares let her lips form a weary smile, half disbelieving. She had heard rumors that, under extreme duress, some Viridians could share their pleas telepathically across vast distances. She had never attempted it consciously. Perhaps her despair had reached beyond herself, calling forth the one soul capable of answering. Before either could speak further, the corridor was illuminated by a harsh white glare. Guards in polished black armor, faces hidden behind reflective visors, stormed in. They seized Ares by the arms, dragging her from the bench. One of them pointed a baton at Riven. "Keep back, stranger," the guard snarled. "She is the property of Lord Atrion and scheduled for the next exhibition. If you don't want trouble, stand aside." But Riven had not come this far to merely observe. Something in Aelis's eyes, in that fleeting moment of connection, reminded him of humanity he'd long thought buried. He saw not a pawn of Helion's cruelty, but a kindred spirit who had endured suffering. The memory of his dream burned in him. So, with a purposeful calm that belied the turmoil roiling within, Riven reached for the sword at his back. The guards stiffened. They had faced fighters before, but something about this man signaled that he was no common sellsword. The tension snapped taut, and in a single fluid motion. Riven's blade came free. Steel glinted beneath the overhead lights. The lead guard made a scoffing sound, an attempt to intimidate. "Drop that, or I'll," Riven lunged in answer. His blade hissed through the air, knocking aside the guard's baton with terrifying precision. A second slash disarmed another guard, who reeled back with a cry, clutching a fresh wound across his forearm. The others backed away to reassess, confusion and anger swirling in their eyes. A captive was one thing, but a reckless swordsman who dared to challenge them in Atrion's stronghold was quite another. "Take Ares," Riven said, his breath measured. "I'll hold them off." His eyes flickered toward a side passage. One he prayed would lead to an exit or deeper corridors where they could vanish. Yet Aelis stood there, trembling with a swirl of emotions. The faintest edges of her empathy told her that Riven was not merely fearless, but was grappling with his own impetus. "You'll be overwhelmed," she replied. "We must find another way." But time was fleeting. More guards thundered into the corridor, alerted by their comrades' shouts. Riven parried a spear thrust aimed for his side. He ducked beneath a swing of an electrified staff. Sparks flew and clung to his leather vest. With each clash, Riven's skill became more evident, honed through battles on far-flung worlds. Still, the odds were not in their favor, seeing that fighting their way out with an unarmed Ares at his side might be impossible. Riven turned his attention to the thick chains binding her. If he could free her, perhaps she could fight or flee. With a deft slash, he cut the iron links. The clang of sundered metal echoed through the corridor. Aelis rubbed her wrists, eyes filling with gratitude, but the respite was short. The guards seized the moment to close in. Forcing Riven to leap backward, Aelis stumbled, still recovering from her captivity, her legs weak from days of deprivation. In the swirl of chaos, a towering guard launched a stun projectile. The small device struck Riven's shoulder, releasing a burst of electricity that sent him staggering. Aelis gasped, pushing herself forward. She reached out her arms in an instinctual motion of empathy. Channeling what little strength remained, she had no illusions she could calm so many hearts, but perhaps she could disrupt their intent. With eyes shining faintly, she projected a wave of emotional resonance, urging the guards to pause, to feel their own conscience. It lasted only a heartbeat. The faint glow in her irises dimmed. The guards hesitated, their grip slackening for the briefest of moments. as if disarmed by sudden introspection. Seizing this opening, Riven caught his breath, lunged anew, and disarmed two more attackers. He and Ailys raced down the corridor, leaving groaning men behind them. Alarm bells resounded, accompanied by the hiss and clatter of mechanical shutters descending. Their route twisted and turned until they came to a locked gate, the metal swirling with arcs of electricity. Clearly, it was designed to bar the path of escaping gladiators. A hiss of frustration escaped Riven. They were trapped. "It seems we can't leave so easily," Riven said grimly. "Can you sense if there's another path?" Ailys shook her head, pressing her palm against her temple. She was still shaken from the exertion of empathic resonance. "My gift, it's not omniscient," she said. "I can feel emotions, but not see physical paths." Boots pounded behind them. The corridor echoed with shouts. "They've gone this way! Bring the shock rifles!" The pair looked at each other, hearts thundering in unison. Then, in an act of desperate courage, Riven spun around, facing the oncoming guard detachment. He raised his sword. "Run if you can, Ailys. I'll—" But before he could complete his sentence, a hidden door in the side wall slid open with a metallic whir. Standing in the shadows was a figure, features obscured by a cloak. It beckoned urgently with a gloved hand. "This way," came a low whisper. Riven hesitated. It could be a trap. But the footsteps behind them grew louder, and Ailys's legs were trembling in exhaustion. With no other option, they dove into the hidden passage. The door sealed quickly behind them, leaving only darkness. For a moment, they stood in silence. The cloaked figure removed a rebreather mask, revealing a woman with short cropped hair. She had stern features and eyes that flashed with defiance. "Name's Sarah," she said quietly. "I've watched what they do to your kind." She nodded at Ailys. "Couldn't let them feed you to that abomination in the arena." Ailys struggled to find words. "Thank you. Talk later," Sarah interrupted. "We have to move, or they'll find us. This passage leads deep beneath the Colosseum. If we hurry, we can find a safe spot. After that, you can decide your next step." Riven studied Sarah's face. It did not wear the malice he'd come to expect from Helion's citizens. She had risked much by intervening. "Lead on," he said softly, guided by the flicker of Sarah's handheld lantern. The trio ventured deeper into the labyrinth of catacombs and maintenance tunnels beneath the arena. The walls were damp with condensation, illuminated by the faint glow of ancient power lines that snaked overhead. The distant roar of the crowd drifted through the metal pipes, reminding them that the spectacle above continued, oblivious to the small rebellion unfolding below. Despite the oppressive darkness, there was an undercurrent of hope in the air. In that place of shadows, a seed of resistance was planted. From that moment forward, Riven and Ailys's destinies were bound, and the first threads of Atrion's empire began to unravel. The catacombs that spiraled beneath Helion's famed Colosseum were as old as the city itself, a winding network carved by unknown hands. Rumor had it these labyrinths predated even the oldest records, their walls engraved with cryptic symbols and the faint echo of ancient chants. Echoes hung in the stale air, hinting at the souls who had perished there, leaving behind fragments of their stories. For Riven, Ailys, and Sarah, these tunnels were now both sanctuary and trap, the only place out of the guards' immediate reach, yet fraught with hazards all their own. Still fatigued from her ordeals, Ailys leaned against the damp wall, gathering breath. Riven stood a pace away, sword at the ready, their new companion. Sarah adjusted her lantern and motioned for them to continue forward. The corridor sloped downward, leading them into a darkness only faintly pierced by the flicker of lamplight. "What lies below?" Riven asked softly, voice echoing off the wet stone. Sarah hesitated, as if weighing how much to divulge. "Maintenance halls for the arena's mechanical traps, old armory rooms, maybe some disused cells," she said. "But also there are corners no one fully understands. Pockets of old energy from Helion's earliest civilizations. Some folks call it the Forgotten Maze. I've been down here before." Scoping it out for the she paused, casting Ailys a guarded look. Well, for certain reasons. Ailey's, heart still pounding, picked up on the hint of concealed intent. "We're grateful," she said in a gentle tone. "But I sense that you're risking more than you say. You don't have to involve yourself in this any further." Sarah's lips curved into a bitter smile. "Let's just say, I've seen enough of Atrion's tyranny to last a lifetime. I only joined the Colosseum staff out of necessity to gain access where others can't. You wouldn't be the first prisoner I've helped, though you are the highest profile." Riven sheathed his blade, recognizing that the immediate danger had lessened. "No one forced you to do so," he said. "Acts of conscience like yours are not common in Helion." She shrugged. Well, we do what we can. Follow me." As they moved deeper, the air grew colder, carrying the pungent scent of ancient machinery. When they reached a junction where 3 tunnels diverged, Sarah paused, surveying the cryptic symbols etched on the walls. Their shapes resembled coiled serpents, or perhaps the curves of an alien alphabet. She inhaled, then took the left passage. "Where does it lead?" Ailey asked, her voice echoing. "A safe room." Sarah responded, "At least, that's what my contacts say it once was. I've used it before to hide fugitives." She smirked. "If it hasn't caved in or been discovered, it might still be there." They continued, careful not to trip on cables or slip on the floor's algae-slick surface. Occasionally, they heard metallic clanks from above, likely the machinery adjusting the arena's deadly obstacles. The faint rumble of the crowd's cheers trickled through, a grim reminder that Helion's thirst for spectacle continued unabated. At last, they rounded a corner to find a rusted doorway. Sarah knocked 3 times, and after a moment, it groaned open from within. Candlelight spilled into the tunnel. They were greeted by a handful of tense faces in a cramped chamber. A man with half his face scarred peered out, a pistol in hand. Upon seeing Sarah, he lowered it, exhaling. "You nearly gave me a heart attack," he muttered, standing aside to let them enter. Inside, the makeshift refuge was little more than an abandoned storage vault, outfitted with rudimentary bedding, flickering candles, and a few crates stuffed with contraband. The group eyed Riven and Ailey warily. Some wore ragged clothes, while others bore old wounds. All seemed haunted by hardships, yet an unspoken camaraderie suffused the space, a bond of shared defiance. "This is Tiber," Sarah introduced, gesturing to the scarred man. "He's been my partner in certain endeavors." Then, turning to the rest, she added, "This is Riven, a swordsman, and Elise, a Viridian." At the mention of Elise's race, a few of the refugees stirred. A woman with a mechanical prosthetic for an arm took a step closer, a Viridian. "I heard Atrion's men were rounding them up." She swallowed, eyes flicking over Ailey's delicate features. "You must have been through hell." Ailey nodded, subdued. "It's not just me. Many of my people are gone. I don't know if they're alive or—" She trailed off, voice trembling. Sarah turned to Tiber. "The guards are swarming the tunnels. We have to lay low for a while. Once the search eases, we'll figure out how to get them out of Helion." Tiber's scarred brow creased. "Easier said than done. Atrion's lockdown has gotten worse. The starport is closed off, except to his loyal trade vessels, and the underground smuggler routes are being watched. We might get out individually, but not all of us." Silence settled over them. Riven considered their predicament. On previous worlds, he had often slipped past blockades by cunning and steel alone. But Helion, with its elaborate surveillance and Atrion's fanatical control, posed a greater challenge. "What about taking refuge in the city's outskirts?" he asked. "We could regroup, find an unguarded pass. The outskirts are crawling with hired mercenaries," Tiber replied. "No safer than the city proper. We might make it, but not with a high-value prisoner like Ailey. They have her face posted everywhere. They'd spare no expense to recapture a Viridian." Hearing their words, Ailey's eyes clouded with doubt. She did not wish to burden them, but her continued presence placed them all in peril. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "If I leave on my own, perhaps you all can. Don't even think it." Sarah cut in firmly. We don't abandon our own. Not here. You're with us now. Several of the others nodded, though fear flickered behind their eyes. It was the unspoken vow of those who had grown beyond the city's cruelty, forging alliances in the darkness. With a heavy sigh, Tiber turned to Sarah and Riven. Word around the underworld is that Atrion's personal agenda is intensifying. He calls it the Purity Project. Propaganda is pumping out daily, stirring fear about the Viridians. It's getting worse. Alis clenched her fists. I suspected as much. My people's empathic abilities. He sees it as a threat to his control. The project is an excuse to justify genocide. A murmur of anger ran through the chamber. Many had faced injustice at Atrion's hands, but the systematic extermination of an entire race sent a chill through even the most hardened hearts. Riven's jaw tightened. If we do nothing, it continues. His mind cast back to the dream that had led him here. How Alis's silent plea had echoed across the boundaries of consciousness. He thought of the sense of purpose that had roused him from his drifting existence. We must find a way to expose him. Sarah scoffed. Expose him. Everyone on Helion already knows he's scum, but he's got a stranglehold on the city. And outside Helion, there are more powerful factions in bed with him. They turn a blind eye because Helion is strategically vital. He funds their wars, sells them weapons. They won't jeopardize that for moral reasons. Then we must show them that this is more than a moral offense, Riven insisted. Make it so they can't ignore him. So their own power is threatened if they continue to stand by. The room fell silent, even by candlelight. The tension was visible on every face. A short man with an augmented eye spoke up, voice shaking. We're just survivors. A handful of us. We can't overthrow him. Alis inhaled deeply. She felt the despair permeating the air. Her empathic sense told her these people had been broken and beaten, yet still clung to hope. That fragile, trembling hope might be fanned into something greater. She stood straighter, letting her voice resonate. Perhaps alone we can't, she said, but the city is vast, and not everyone supports Atrion. If we unite, if we gather more who stand against this evil, we might have a chance. I have to believe that. Her empathy rippled outward not forcefully, but enough that each person felt their own latent courage stir. If we do nothing, she continued, the next to be hunted could be anyone. We must act while we still can. Sarah glanced at Tiber, then back at Riven and Elis. A spark flared in her gaze. All right, she said quietly. We can try to contact some allies, but we must be careful. Thus began a slow, perilous endeavor. For days, they hid in the catacombs, venturing up to the city in disguise when necessary, forging new contacts, quietly recruiting. Information trickled in. Rumors of hidden Viridian enclaves, disillusioned soldiers looking for a chance to defect, and citizens fed up with Atrion's tyranny. At the core of this nascent resistance were Riven, Alis, Sarah, and Tiber. Others came and went, bringing supplies or intelligence. They established safe houses in old warehouses, deserted sewers, or forsaken alleys where Helion's patrols rarely ventured. A coded system of communication was devised, using small tokens etched with certain symbols that indicated safe meeting spots. While Tiber orchestrated supply lines, Sarah reached out to fellow staffers in the Colosseum, gleaning inside details about Atrion's schedule and security measures. Riven, meanwhile, ventured into Helion's underbelly in search of potential allies among the planet's mercenaries and smugglers beings who might be swayed by coin or principle. Alis, though physically weaker than the rest, lent her empathic gifts to quell doubts and heal deep-seated fears, forging trust where suspicion might otherwise dominate. One afternoon, Riven encountered a group of off-world gladiators who had been conscripted into the arena against their will. In a dimly lit tavern near the starport, he shared drinks with them, carefully probing their feelings about Helion's regime. He found they were hungry for a chance to escape. Some even nursed open hatred for Atrion. Seizing the opening, Riven offered them a place in the resistance, hinting at a plan that would not only set them free, but tear down the entire system of forced blood sport. Their eyes glowed with the faint light of possibility. On another evening, Tiber secured stolen records that revealed the scale of Atrion's purity project, systematic detention camps, forced labor facilities, and execution orders for Viridians captured outside Helion. The truths were horrifying. Once fully compiled, this evidence would be more than enough to turn the galaxy's eyes upon Atrion if they could get it out. But Helion's communications were strictly monitored. The starport was under constant watch. Smuggling data out required cunning and a secure channel. The puzzle seemed insurmountable, yet the group pressed on. Each small step felt like a victory against the gloom. Ailys, though haunted by the uncertainty regarding her people's fates, found solace in the camaraderie of those who risked everything to stand with her. The guilt she carried, believing herself responsible for placing them in harm's way, was tempered by the knowledge that their cause was just. One particular night, the group assembled in a cramped hideout beneath a shuttered textile factory. A once grand tapestry lay half-rotted against the wall, and the reek of decaying fabric filled the air. They spread out Tiber's stolen records on a crude table made from wooden planks, poring over the atrocities documented there. "It's worse than we feared," Tiber said, grimacing. "Atrion has been shipping Viridians off-world. Too. Some to mining colonies, others to undisclosed labs. This is genocide on an interstellar scale." Sarah ran her fingers through her short hair. "How do we publish this without being intercepted?" She glanced at Ailys, who had a hand pressed to her temple, trying to steady her swirling emotions. Riven tapped a file with the tip of his knife. "We need a decisive moment. Something that forces an open confrontation, exposing everything in front of enough witnesses that word will spread. Unstoppable. The galaxy might ignore a quiet leak, but a public upheaval could spark action." Tiber grunted. "You're proposing we start a riot, an insurrection in Helion streets. Do you know how many would die?" "No," Riven replied softly, his face somber. "I'm proposing we stage a grand revelation in the place Atrion's power is most revered, his Colosseum. If we break his facade there, where he parades his strength, it might galvanize the oppressed masses. They have grown too accustomed to fear. We must disrupt that." "And how do we accomplish this without all of us being slaughtered?" Sarah asked pointedly. Ailys lifted her head, eyes aglow with an idea. "Atrion's eyes will be on the next major event, some grand spectacle, no doubt. He thrives on them. He'll be in attendance, along with his courtiers, soldiers, the press, possibly even off-world dignitaries. If we find a way to commandeer that event, present evidence of his crimes, both physically and emotionally, to the crowds, using my empathic gift to underscore the horrors, then the city might witness the truth." Riven considered the risk. They would be walking into the lion's den, but deep down, he felt the unwavering pull of destiny that had brought him to Ailys's side. "Then we must gather enough fighters to seize control of the arena floor. Hold it long enough to broadcast the truth." Silence ensued as each realized the magnitude of that step. Still, a collective resolve formed. They had been living in the dark, scrambling to survive. Now, the notion of striking at the heart of Atrion's regime offered them a chance for true liberation, albeit with a steep price. Tiber exhaled, glancing at Sarah. "We'll need more than the handful of us." She nodded. "We'll have to rally every slave gladiator, every disaffected soldier, every denizen of Helion who's had enough of seeing their loved ones fed into the Colosseum's maw." She locked eyes with Riven. "This plan must be airtight. One misstep, and we all die. Or worse, betray the last hope for the Viridians." Ailys let out a shaky breath. "I will not let fear rule us. We owe it to every life Atrion has stolen." Thus, a bold strategy began to form a plan that would require infiltration, cunning, and a willingness to risk everything. Over the subsequent nights, they hammered out the details with hushed voices by candlelight. Messengers were sent across the city to ascertain the loyalty of certain fighters and disillusioned guards. The once disparate pockets of resistance were slowly drawn together. exchanging coded messages and forging a loose but growing alliance. Each new development steeled Aelis's determination. However battered she felt, a new strength emerged in her, shaped by the gratitude and fellowship of her companions. As the day of reckoning drew near, she found herself alone with Riven in a dim corridor. He was sharpening his sword, the rasp of whetstone echoing against the walls. "Riven," she said quietly, stepping closer. "You risked your life for me when you had no reason to." He glanced up, meeting her gaze. "When I first saw you, I felt something I cannot quite explain. It was as if your despair was calling out to me. Awakening something, I'd tried to bury something that cared." Aelis reached out, resting a hand on his arm. She could feel the complex web of his emotions, guilt from past battles, sorrow, but also a fierce devotion he had only begun to understand. "I'm not sure how my gift caused that dream, if it even did, but I'm grateful fate has brought you here. You've given me and my people a fighting chance." He set the whetstone aside, his voice faltering for a moment. "Before Helion, my life was aimless, wandering from one place to another, fighting for coin or survival. I told myself attachments were too dangerous, that I'd lost too much already. But meeting you has changed that." A warm flush touched Aelis's cheeks. She was not entirely sure what to say, for in the swirl of revolution and fear, her heart had also found unexpected solace in Riven's presence. The moment hung with unspoken promises, shared burdens that might yet yield deeper bonds. Before either could voice more, Sarah stepped into the corridor, her posture tense. "It's time. We've just received word. Atrion is planning the largest demonstration yet for the weekend. Rumor is it'll involve a live broadcast across the sector. This is our best shot." Riven and Aelis exchanged a glance. The moment for personal reflection would have to wait. The path they'd chosen demanded immediate action. With renewed resolve, they followed Sarah back to the makeshift war room, where a battered group of souls prepared to ignite the spark that could topple a tyrant. The sky above Helion turned a bruised shade of lavender on the morning of Atrion's grand demonstration. Banners hung from the city's skyline, projected by holograms that brandished the emblem of the Purity Project. In the streets, citizens moved with a restless energy, some curious to witness the spectacle, others grimly resigned to watch yet another gruesome event. Security checkpoints dotted every major intersection. Patrol ships hovered in the sky, scanning for suspicious activity deep below, in the catacombs. Riven and Aelis prepared alongside their new allies. The final hours before the coup were laced with tension. Sarah moved through the crowd, distributing makeshift weapons smuggled from the armory. Tiber organized small squads, some to infiltrate the stands, others to secure the gates. Riven, for his part, stood at the head of a group of former gladiators who had pledged their blades to the cause. Aelis closed her eyes, calling upon the steady calm of her heritage. Despite her fear, she centered her thoughts on the mission's greater purpose. Her empathic gift touched the warriors around her, instilling a quiet fortitude. She had no illusions about the costs of battle, but in her vision of a brighter future, she saw the faces of her kin freed from chains, the hateful propaganda torn down. When the appointed hour arrived, the rebels split into prearranged units. Some would infiltrate the Colosseum disguised as attendants or spectators. Others would approach the outer gates and cause diversions, drawing guards away from the entrances. Riven and Aelis stayed at the rear with a hand-picked force, ready to strike the heart of the arena at Sarah's signal. They made their way through dank tunnels until they neared an exit leading to the sub-levels beneath the Colosseum stands. The hum of the crowd overhead was already thunderous. They paused, exchanging final glances. "Remember," Riven said to the gathered fighters in a low voice, "we hold the floor once we get out there. Don't let Atrion's men corral us. The moment we secure the center, Aelis will broadcast the evidence and the truth to everyone in attendance. Maybe even across the sector if we can hijack the transmissions." Heads nodded in grim determination. Then, with cautious steps, the group ascended a spiral stair that opened into a dark alcove behind the arena walls. Through the cracks, They glimpsed thousands of spectators cheering in the stands. On the central platform, a stage had been erected, ringed by towering spires that crackled with energy. Lord Atrion himself, clad in ceremonial armor of polished obsidian, stood with an entourage of elite guards and sycophantic advisors. An announcer's voice boomed across the loudspeakers. "Welcome, citizens of Helion, to this glorious day of reckoning, where we reaffirm our commitment to purity and strength. Today, witness the judgment of those who threaten our way of life." A hush fell over the seats, thick with anticipation. Riven felt a chill creep up his spine. He thought of all the helpless souls forced to fight or die here for Helion's amusement. That cycle would end today, or he would die trying. From her vantage, Ailey spotted a group of shackled prisoners being led into the arena, a mix of Viridians and suspected sympathizers. Anger and sorrow gnawed at her heart. She steeled herself, reminding her trembling spirit that they would save them, that this horror would not go unanswered. A coded static crackled over a small communicator pinned to Sarah's belt. The pre-arranged signal. Phase 1 had begun. Explosions suddenly echoed from somewhere outside the stadium, likely sabotage in the power generators or guard towers. Shouts rippled through the crowd as people looked around in confusion. Atrion bristled on the stage. He gestured to his guards, who rushed into action. The announcer stammered, uncertain how to proceed. It was the perfect distraction. Sarah glanced at Riven and nodded. With a fierce cry, the rebels emerged from the alcove, leaping onto the arena floor simultaneously. Pockets of disguised fighters in the stands threw off their cloaks, brandishing smuggled blasters. Riven's heart pounded as he charged across the stadium's metallic ground, sword glinting in the harsh artificial light. The crowd erupted in screams, panic, and outrage. Atrion's men scrambled to form defensive lines. Some of the rank-and-file soldiers, witnessing the wave of resistance, wavered. Others unleashed volleys of plasma fire, striking down any rebel not swift enough to dodge or take cover. Ayla's remained near the rear, protected by a ring of allied gladiators. She focused on her empathic gift, reaching out to the frightened civilians in the stands, urging them to see the truth. Flashes of fear, hope, anger, and confusion assaulted her senses. She fought to remain calm, projecting clarity to the countless hearts pounding in terror. In that swirl of collective emotion, she planted a single message: witness the truth. Atrion's reign must end. Riven's blade clashed with a guard's electrified spear. Sparks flew, and he deftly sidestepped a retaliatory strike. Another guard lunged from behind, but an allied gladiator tackled him to the ground. Chaos engulfed the arena. Smoke billowed from the sabotage outside, and the cacophony of battle drowned out the announcer's frantic pleas for order. Up in the stands, Tiber and his squad battled to reach the broadcasting booth. If they could override the Colosseum's audio-visual system, they would transmit the damning evidence across every display. Meanwhile, Sarah sprinted toward the dais where Atrion stood, forcing her way past a knot of elite guards. She fired a pistol with deadly accuracy, taking down two at close range. Atrion's cold eyes flared with fury behind his obsidian helmet. "Traitors!" he hissed, drawing a ceremonial blade crackling with dark energy. He advanced down the steps, posture radiating lethal confidence. A pair of massive, cybernetically enhanced bodyguards flanked him, monstrous in scale. Spurred by righteous anger, Riven disengaged from his current foe and charged toward Atrion, sword raised. This was the moment he had long anticipated, though he had never admitted it aloud. The tyrant who had wrought such misery would face his reckoning. "Stop them!" Atrion roared, pointing at Riven and Ailey. Waves of guards converged on the pair, but the rebels fought tooth and nail to create an opening. A fraction of the audience, seeing the unbridled cruelty, began to cheer the insurgents, spurred by Ailey's empathic influence. Others cowered, unsure where to place their loyalties. As Riven closed the distance to Atrion, one of the bodyguards lunged, a towering figure in mechanized armor, Riven ducked beneath a thunderous fist that dented the arena floor, twisting gracefully. He slashed at a weak joint in the guard's plating. Sparks flew, and the giant howled in pain. But another backhand knocked Riven sprawling. Across the arena, a fresh wave of soldiers surged in, threatening to overwhelm the rebels. Ailey felt her chest tighten with fear. She sensed the tidal wave of hostility bearing down on them. Summoning a reservoir of courage, she pushed her empathic field outward, projecting into the guards' minds the suffering they were about to inflict. Some faltered, their hearts suddenly flooded with regret. Others, consumed by Atrion's indoctrination, snarled in defiance. At last, Tiber's voice echoed overhead, "Citizens of Helion, and all who watch this broadcast behold Atrion's crimes." The holoscreens throughout the stadium flickered, revealing a montage of documents, testimonies, and images showing the brutalized Viridians, the secret concentration camps, the systematic extermination. Gasps and cries of outrage rippled through the onlookers. "This is the truth," Tiber's voice declared, echoing across the stands. "Atrion seeks to erase an entire race under the guise of purity. Will you allow this?" The crowd erupted into a cacophony. Some screamed in horror at the revelations. Others turned on the guards, hurling debris or fists in anger. A small but significant fraction of soldiers dropped their weapons, repulsed by the atrocities. Order was unraveling before Atrion's eyes. Infuriated, Atrion thrust his blade skyward, the dark energy swirling ominously. "I will not be undone," he roared. "This planet is mine, my will is law." The spires around the stage flared to life, channeling arcs of crackling power. With a twisted grin, he directed a surge of energy at the nearest group of rebels, sending them flying. Smoke rose where the lightning struck, and shrieks filled the air. Riven struggled to his feet, ignoring the ache in his ribs. He locked eyes with Atrion, an unspoken challenge. In the swirl of mayhem, he advanced, crossing blades with the second bodyguard. Their clash rattled the stadium walls. The bodyguard's augmented strength threatened to overpower him, but Riven's skill and resolve held firm. With a quick feint, he severed a coolant line on the guard's armor, causing it to seize up. A final strike brought the giant crashing to the ground in a shower of sparks. Now it was only Riven and Atrion, swords drawn, while all around them, the Colosseum seethed with conflict. Atrion's obsidian armor glimmered in the flickering light. He snarled, lashing out with a diagonal slash that crackled with malevolent force. Riven parried, though the impact jarred his arms painfully. Meanwhile, from the dais steps, Sarah and Ailey tried to reach the cluster of prisoners. The rebels held off the guards long enough for them to break the chains of the captive Viridians. As soon as the shackles fell away, Ailey gently embraced her fellow kinsfolk. Tears streaked her face as she sensed their torment. She whispered comforting words, letting her empathy soothe their terror. But Atrion noticed. With a hateful glare, he turned his blade toward Ailey, a savage wave of energy coiling at the weapon's tip. Riven lunged, intercepting the strike at the last second. Sparks flared, scorching the ground. The force of the collision knocked him back several paces. A searing pain coursed through his side. "Your defiance means nothing," Atrion spat, voice echoing with mania. "I will cleanse this planet of every Viridian, every traitor, starting with you." Gasping, Riven gritted his teeth. "If that's your vow," he retorted, "then I will fight until my last breath to stop you." Despite the agony, Riven pressed forward. He swung fiercely, forcing Atrion to backstep. Their blades sang in the open air, locked in a dance of lethal precision. Around them, the rebellion raged, but the ring of fighters instinctively gave space for the mortal struggle. Even the terrified citizens in the stands watched with bated breath. Blood trickled down Riven's arm. He ignored it, focusing every ounce of his will. With a deft move, he disarmed Atrion's left gauntlet, exposing the tyrant's arm. Atrion snarled, retaliating with a savage backslash that ripped through Riven's vest. Drawing a pained shout from his lips, He staggered, but remained upright, driven by the memory of his dream and the knowledge of what was at stake. Gathering his remaining strength, Riven launched a final strike. Their swords collided in a massive crack of energy. For a heartbeat, they were locked in deadlock, each refusing to yield. Then, with a defiant roar, Riven channeled his last reserves of power, pressing Atrion's blade aside. His sword bit deep into Atrion's armor, carving through the obsidian plating. Atrion cried out, stumbling backward as sparks danced around him. Riven panted, each breath searing his lungs, but he advanced again. Atrion tried to summon another wave of dark energy, but the conduit spires were failing, some sabotaged by the rebels, others damaged by stray blasts. The aura of malignant power flickered. Seeing his advantage, Riven lunged, plunging his sword through a weak point in the tyrant's chest plate. Atrion froze, eyes wide with shock. His blade clattered to the ground. Blood bloomed around the wound. For an instant, the stadium fell silent, as if time itself paused. Then Atrion coughed, choking on words of denial. He fell to his knees, gasping raggedly. "This is impossible," he spat. "I am Helion's rightful lord." Riven withdrew his sword with a trembling hand. "Not anymore," he said quietly. Then Atrion collapsed, body slumped on the metallic floor. The hush in the arena was deafening. In that moment, Tiber's voice again resounded from the speakers. "Atrion has fallen." A great cry went up from the stands, some of triumph, others of stunned realization. The guard squads, leaderless and demoralized, threw down their weapons or were swiftly overcome by the rebels. A wave of emotion washed through the stadium, an outpouring of relief, disbelief, and hope. Ailys rushed to Riven's side, tears of gratitude shining in her eyes. He sank to one knee, wincing from multiple wounds. She pressed her hands against his injuries, letting her empathic gift flow to ease the pain. Though she was no trained healer, the contact ignited a profound sense of unity between them. Two souls who had risked everything for a chance at freedom. All around, the throngs of spectators poured onto the arena floor. Some shouted for the rebels. Others fell to their knees in relief. Freed prisoners embraced each other. Sarah sprinted to the dais, a broad, disbelieving grin on her face. Tiber joined her, brandishing the stolen files that had exposed the Purity Project. The aftermath was a chaotic blur. With Atrion's death, the chain of command crumbled. Rebels swiftly took control of the Colosseum, dispatching medics to tend to the wounded. Many of the city's populace, upon learning the full extent of Atrion's crimes, swelled the ranks of the resistance. Meanwhile, transmissions carrying proof of the atrocities spread beyond Helion's atmosphere, reaching networks across neighboring systems. Lord Atrion's loyalists attempted to regroup in pockets throughout the city, but confronted by the collective outrage of the citizens, they found themselves outnumbered. Even the hired mercenaries saw the change in the wind and abandoned their contracts. One by one, Helion's bastions of tyranny fell. The great iron gates were thrown open, the starport reclaimed, the propaganda machines dismantled. It did not happen in a day. Weeks of struggle followed, but the tide had turned irreversibly. Under the leadership of an interim council composed of rebels, city representatives, and outside advisors, Helion began to shed its shackles. The city's new guardians scoured the planet for the enslaved Viridians, releasing them from camps and forced labor sites. Some were found in sorrowful shape, malnourished and traumatized. Ailys and her fellow Viridians worked tirelessly, using their gifts to mend emotional wounds as best they could. Still, the scars of oppression were not so easily erased. So many had lost loved ones in the Purity Project. Grief lingered in the streets, and many corners of Helion remained battered, broken. Riven, recovering from his injuries in a makeshift infirmary, watched the planet's slow, halting transformation with cautious optimism. He had not set out to be a hero, yet circumstances had cast him in that role. And while many cheered his name, he felt more gratitude than pride. Gratitude for the life Ailys had breathed into him, When at last he was strong enough to walk unassisted, Riven emerged from his recovery bed to find Elise awaiting him. She had been volunteering with a team of medics, offering solace to those still reeling from the violence. In the corridor, her silver hair caught the glow of overhead lamps, her eyes reflecting a quiet sadness tinged with resolve. "How are you feeling?" she asked, stepping close. Riven gave a wry smile. "Better, thanks to the doctors and to you." He looked around at the bustling corridor. People passed by, some Viridian, some human, some other races, each busy rebuilding a world ravaged by tyranny. The faint smell of disinfectant mingled with the tang of machinery. Elise touched his arm gently. "Helion owes you a debt. We all do." He shook his head. "We owe each other. It took all of us, Sarah, Tiber, the other rebels, the citizens who finally stood up to Atrion. I was just one blade in the fight." A small laugh escaped Elise's lips. "But it was your blade that struck the final blow, and your determination that carried us through the darkest moments." He looked at her then, truly letting himself feel the warmth of her presence without the overshadowing haze of battle. "What happens now, Elise? For you, for the Viridians, for Helion?" She exhaled softly. "We face the aftermath. The new council is forming, trying to establish a just government. My people need time to heal, to find those still missing across the galaxy. Perhaps we can return to our mission of diplomacy, only now with a renewed understanding of the fragility of peace." Riven considered the path ahead. Once, the prospect of staying in one place would have seemed alien to him. Yet here he was, bound to a cause greater than himself. "And you, will you remain on Helion?" he asked. A flicker of a smile curved her lips. "For a while, yes. The new leaders have asked me to advise them, to help reconcile the city's wounds. It's a daunting task, but we can't just abandon the people who risked so much for us." He nodded, a faint pang tugging at his heart. The life of a wanderer beckoned, but so did the idea of standing by Elise's side, forging a brighter future. "Then you'll need someone to watch your back," he said quietly. "There are still remnants of Atrion's regime out there, and not everyone will welcome a Viridian presence." Her eyes glistened with gratitude. She stepped closer, pressing her hand gently to his chest. He felt the subtle warmth of her empathy, soothing the last ghost of pain from his wounds. "You're not just a protector anymore, Riven," she whispered, her gaze unwavering. "You are part of us now, part of this new beginning." He leaned in, resting his forehead against hers. In that intimate moment, words became unnecessary. They stood, surrounded by the hum of a city still in flux, yet buoyed by a fragile hope that one day, Helion would be known for compassion rather than cruelty. Their shared bond, born in the darkest crucible, was now a promise of better tomorrows. Beyond the infirmary walls, the city moved forward. Statues of Atrion were torn down, replaced by memorials for the countless lives lost. The Colosseum itself was dismantled, its twisted machinery shut down for good. In its place, open forums and halls of learning were proposed, so that future generations could gather not for bloodshed, but for enlightenment. The galaxy watched in wary fascination as Helion emerged from tyranny's shadow into an uncertain but hopeful dawn. Not long after, on a day when the skies above Helion bloomed a gentle gold at sunset, a small ceremony was held at the site of the fallen Colosseum. Leaders from across the city, alongside delegates from neighboring star systems, came to witness the final closure of Helion's dark chapter. A tall pillar was raised, inscribed with names of the persecuted, a testament to the cost of Atrion's reign. Elise, dressed in simple white robes, stood at the foot of the pillar. Her empathic senses told her the crowd was a mosaic of emotion, sorrow, relief, determination, joy. She spoke softly yet firmly, her voice amplified by newly installed systems. "May this monument forever remind us that cruelty can be overcome, that the price of silence is too high. We stand united across our differences, in pursuit of a future where no voice is silenced, no race oppressed." Among the listeners stood Riven, arms crossed over his chest, scars from the battle still healing. He gazed at Ailys with unwavering admiration, reflecting on the distance they had traveled, both literally and within their own souls. In that moment, he allowed a rare smile to grace his features. When the ceremony concluded, Ailys descended the steps. The crowd parted for her as she approached Riven. She slipped her hand into his. "You've done so much," she said, her eyes shimmering with gratitude. "Stay for a while, won't you?" He squeezed her hand gently. "I'm not going anywhere," he replied. In his heart, he felt a sense of belonging he had never known. The ghosts of his lonely past were quieter now, overshadowed by a newfound purpose and bond. They walked together through the twilight-tinged city that was no longer a pit of despair, but a realm in the midst of rebirth. People from all walks of life gathered in the streets, their faces lit with cautious hope. Music drifted from open doors, and laughter mingled with the distant hum of starships bringing supplies and aid. Change was far from complete, yet the seeds of a brighter destiny had been planted. In time, Helion would become a testament to what courage and unity could achieve. The scars of its history would never fully vanish, but they would serve as lessons for future generations. Standing hand in hand amid the city's revitalized avenues, Riven and Ailys felt the promise of a tomorrow where empathy could triumph over tyranny, and where even in the darkest cosmos, a single spark of compassion might light the path to freedom. Thus ended the reign of Lord Atrion, and thus began a new age for Helion, one founded on the principle that cruelty dies where hope is born, and that the thread of destiny, once woven between two souls, can unravel even the mightiest chain of oppression. For in the end, they had proved one eternal truth, that beneath the cosmic Colosseums of our darkest fears, a lone warrior's resolve, joined with a diplomat's empathy, can shatter any cage. And so, with hearts uplifted and the horizon alight, they walked forward into the dawn together.